Hello, I'm George Harrison and I play solo guitar.
When people talk about the Beatles, it's usually Lennon and McCartney who steal the spotlight. But there was another Beatle, quieter, deeper, and just as brilliant. George Harrison. At first, he was simply the quiet one, the lead guitarist with sharp riffs and soft harmonies. But behind that calm presence was a rising creative force. As the Beatles evolved, so did George in a way, style, and pace that matched his personality. From humble beginnings to spiritual anthems and emotional masterpieces, Harrison's songwriting journey was one of the band's most surprising transformations. In this video, we're counting down 13 unforgettable Beatles songs written by George Harrison. Presented in the order they appeared on the original UK album releases, these tracks reveal how George went from a background player to a full-blown visionary. Get ready to rediscover the brilliance of the man who proved he was much more than just the quiet Beatle. Let's dive into the genius of George Harrison. Welcome to the Beatles Institute. Enjoy the video. 1963, Don't Bother Me from the With the Beatles album. George Harrison's first solo composition to appear on a Beatles album, Don't Bother Me, marked a turning point. Released on With the Beatles. In 1963, the song stands out for its moody tone and darker lyrics, revealing a more introspective George early on. Though he later called it a fairly crappy song, it was a bold first step in establishing himself as more than just the quiet Beatle. 1965, I Need You from the Help album. This was George's first truly personal song to make it onto a Beatles album. With its signature volume pedal guitar, I Need You is simple, heartfelt, and shows a young Harrison beginning to find his voice as a composer. 1965, If I Needed Someone from the Rubber Soul album. Just a few months later, George dropped this jangly, Birds-inspired gem, a folk rock fusion packed with rich harmonies. More than just an experiment, it was proof that George Harrison was starting to evolve into a true songwriting force. 1965, Think for Yourself from the album Rubber Soul. In 1965, George Harrison made his voice heard on Rubber Soul with Think for Yourself. With biting lyrics and a distorted fuzz bass, it stood out like a protest in the middle of a love-in. It was George's first real message of independence, urging you to stop following and start thinking. This wasn't just a contribution, it was a warning shot.
There's one for you, 19 for...
1966, Taxman from the album Revolver. George kicks off Revolver with Taxman, a blistering critique of Britain's tax system. With a razor-sharp riff and biting sarcasm, he steps into the role of provocateur. Forget the quiet Beatle. This was a man fed up, fired up, and ready to shout. Taxman wasn't just a song, it was a declaration of power.
Each day just goes so...
1966, Love You Too from the album Revolver. Also on Revolver. Love You Too marked George's deep dive into Indian music and mysticism. Sitar, tabla, and ancient philosophy came together in a bold sonic shift. This wasn't about fusion, it was about building bridges across worlds. With this track, George found his spiritual voice loud and clear. 1967, Within You Without You, from the album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. A year later, George pushed even further with Within You Without You, the spiritual heartbeat of Sgt. Pepper. No other Beatles appear on the track. It's all George, all vision. A hypnotic meditation on ego, illusion, and human connection. It's more sermon than song. It's where George stopped imitating and started enlightening. 1968, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, from the album The Beatles, known as the White Album. In 1968, George delivered pure emotional fire with While My Guitar Gently Weeps on the White Album. Eric Clapton joined on lead guitar, pouring blues into George's aching lyrics. It's vulnerable, poetic, and impossible to ignore. This wasn't just one of his best. It's one of the Beatles' best, period. 1969, It's All Too Much, from the album Yellow Submarine. Recorded in the summer of love in 1967 but released in 1969, It's All Too Much is George's psychedelic storm. With layers of swirling guitars and cosmic lyrics, it embraces chaos with a grin. It's not subtle, but it's not supposed to be. This is George giving into the moment and taking us with him.
To your this old brown shoe.
1969, Old Brown Shoe, B-side of the single The Ballad of John and Yoko. Old Brown Shoe came out as the B-side to The Ballad of John and Yoko, but it's no throwaway. With its quirky rhythm and clever lyrics, it's George cutting loose. Confident, playful, and technically sharp, it showed just how far he'd come as a songwriter. By 1969, he wasn't following. He was sprinting ahead. "1969, Here Comes the Sun," from the superb album Abbey Road. On Abbey Road, George gave the world Here Comes the Sun, written during a quiet escape in Eric Clapton's garden. Soft acoustic strums meet one of the most hopeful melodies in rock history. It's about renewal, clarity, and the joy of a new day, and it might just be the purest moment in the Beatles' entire catalog. 1969, Something from the album Abbey Road. Also from Abbey Road, Something is George's timeless love song. Lennon and McCartney praised it. Sinatra called it the greatest love song ever written. It's tender, elegant, and emotionally perfect. With Something, George proved he wasn't just catching up. He had arrived. Something is absolutely his masterpiece of all at the Beatles' time.
Don't wanna leave her now.
1970, All Things Must Pass. Written during the Beatles' final years, All Things Must Pass was offered by George for inclusion on their albums, but never made the cut. Instead, it became the title track of his groundbreaking triple solo album in 1970. Deeply philosophical and melodically rich, the song proved that George had been sitting on masterpieces all along, finally stepping into his full creative power after the band's breakup. From a shy young guitarist to a spiritual and groundbreaking songwriter, George Harrison left a legacy within the Beatles that goes far beyond statistics. His songs touch on love, loss, social critique, transcendence, and the eternal search for something greater, always with beauty and depth. He didn't write in volume, but he made up for it with quality and soul. And if you think George shone brightly in the Beatles, just wait until you see what he would go on to do in his solo career. But that is a story for another video. Thank you for watching Beatles Institute.